and redirecting. Let me refresh.
Oh, well, no, go for it now.
Okay, yeah, we are live. Hey, everybody, welcome to the new Alpha Vedic Off-Grid Elegance channel.
Okay, and the moment of echo.
Echo, echo, bravo. Yeah, very excited that we're launching this. Well, it's kind of acting as a backup channel of sorts, but more it's geared towards the off-grid elegance content that Barre and Dead Lando will be creating from the farm to inspire and to motivate you guys to move towards a more self-sovereign, sufficient lifestyle that isn't mucking in the pig slop. So welcome.
Yeah. All this will also be, it's not separating from Alpha Vedic. It is Alpha Vedic, but it, like you said, it serves as a backup channel for when that inevitable third strike comes, which we're taking naughty time out today. And also it will feature a lot of more doings here at the farm. And then we'll simultaneously stream on both once we're back on the regular channel, and then also post videos to both places. So, but this would be great because we can get a head start with our established audience to get this one populated.
Yeah, we are streaming on
We need
Rumble.
your help, folks.
Yeah, we're streaming on Rumble as well as our good friend Sayer G's Unite network, so you can check us out there. I will say I've been calling it out, guys, and about Rumble. I know a lot of people are hip to it, and we appreciate it, but they just got like 50 million in funding from BlackRock and are starting to censor. So what do you know? When you have centralized services run by corporations built on greed, you get that sort of behavior, and I think, Barre, that'll be a wonderful segue into what we're talking about today.
Exactly. Hey, I want to ask you real quick. There's that event that Pete Santilli with My Pillow. I just saw the link you sent me and I listened to it. I'm kind of intrigued. Is that for real?
I guess, I don't know. Our friend Etienne de la Bowtie Dose, Bochi Dose, shared that with me through his Substack channel, and that is quite a interesting narrative, and I do feel like there is a lot of legitimacy behind that, and it could be the final sort of, for me, it would be wonderful justification on everything I've been talking about with the Obamas specifically and the CIA and all the deep state connections. But yeah, Barre, it's pretty wild, huh?
It seems for real, and it coincides with a lot of things I've heard for many years behind the scenes. So, there's some good people on our side out there. Anyway, just wanted to bring that up and maybe give people a heads up to tune in, because if it is what we think it is, the more people, the merrier to join on for sure. People need to know about this.
So that is going to be on Forbidden Knowledge TV, August 16th through the 17th. And so you can go to Forbidden Knowledge TV and check that out. And it's supposed to be just groundbreaking information coming out from the Pete Santilli show. And we're talking about Dennis Montgomery and FBI informants, whistleblowers about and it's weird because it connects to the Bundys. And the attorneys they had, and essentially certain software programs that were first created back in, I think it goes back to the 90s, to take out terrorist organizations, and then certain actors. And we are on our new channel here, so we want to be careful.
We'll probably get our first strike today on our first episode, right?
But nefarious actors in the deep state and the shadow government using this for their own demonic means to basically not only control voting systems, but to spy on American citizens and people, and this goes all the way to the Obamas and all the people.
Goes back to JFK.
Oh yeah, yeah. So interesting to see how this will play into what RFK is doing in his campaign if he latches onto this and calls this out, because whether you feel that RFK out there is controlled op or whatever, and I don't agree with a lot of what he says, and the fact he's connected to the Democratic Party, and I don't believe in the idea of authority at all. But that being said, if getting this out, and if he has a platform to get this information out, that is extremely powerful.
Yeah, I have some backstories you've heard about RFK, which I can't go into on the air, but kind of a removed personal experience. And also just more recently got to be a fly on the wall with a personal meeting that was streamed in right here. So again, that was private, but he's the real deal. And of course, everybody's got stuff in their closet. But some people are, I think, destined to do certain things regardless of their human experience. We all have a human experience. The human is flawed, but that's the point of playing the game in the first place, to come in and have our little dramas and tests. And then some of us rise to the occasion. And his uncle, JFK, was one of those. I hate to publicly admit it, but through my college years and early adulthood, I was a JFK Democrat. And then, of course, I learned that the whole voting thing was a scam. And, then I just became neutral. But that's where my last political alliances were. And RFK, his heart, I believe, is in the right spot. And I know a lot of people disagree with that, but I do have a little bit of information on the backside that makes me believe that. And what I really like about this episode that's coming up in August is that it's really admonishing people not to wait till the election scam in 2024. That's not going to change a thing. It's not designed to. It's a big distraction, and something's going to happen first, real big. And of course, the other side also has events planned that will, they hope, bring us to our knees so that they can just bring in their final agenda, but that's not going to happen. And that does bring us into the topic of the day. So, Mike, do you want to, should we
hit record,
read our little intro that I did yesterday? I don't know if that's appropriate or not, since we don't have a guest today.
Yeah, I should hit record, and we'll fire up the podcast. This is a little special bonus preview content from our new channel and those watching the stream. So let's do it. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alphacast. I'm Mike Winter. I'm here as always with the jocular Dr. Barre Paul Lando, coming to you live and direct from the great state of Jefferson, where freedom still reigns supreme. Indeed, it does.
You've had your thesaurus out this morning.
Well, it just came to me because you're a jock and you like to tell jokes. So I think that's a pretty fitting description of you. You are quite actually a very funny person, that those don't know. Hanging out with Barre over here, it's like being in the locker room in many ways, but
my sense of humor got me in a lot of trouble throughout my life, because sometimes what I thought was funny, other people in authoritative positions didn't think so.
That is definitely not a shocker, Barre. I think that's an important attribute to have, especially when facing tyranny. To laugh in its face is extremely important. It's great to be here with you today. We're doing an in-house chat, and I'm excited for this one because I think it kind of encompasses a lot of what not only you do on the farm, in the lab, doing the spagyrics and the alchemy, but what I do in terms of economics and decentralization and the fundamentals behind value and spirit and the material world. So I will read the little intro and we'll jump right in. Guys, there's like 3 or 4 days left of free access to the end of COVID, by the way. Barre's wonderful, actually, some of the highlights that I've been getting response to are the Bigglesons and you going deep into your version of detoxing from the shots, which isn't even detoxing. And that's been a highlight. And then also the bioterrain talk you and I did. People are blown away by that and didn't even know that.
Oh, so that already aired?
That dropped, I think, yesterday or the day before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I think that's dropping today. There's 90 plus sessions, guys. So forgive me. I even lose track. I think that dropped today, actually. So yeah, it's funny. I was getting messages this morning about it. So yeah, it's been a great ride, and 100,000 attendees coming in on an event that's all about dispelling the germ theory mythos. So I think that's a great sign of where we're going in the world. Yeah.
And not just germ theory, but especially Covidius erectus.
Exactly. And we must watch our P's and Q's on this new channel for sure. But that being said, thank you guys for anybody who's opted in supporting that. Thank you for supporting Alphavedic. You can find out more about us at alphavedic.com. And thank you if you are coming out to Music and Sky. Barre and I were just chatting before we came live about the logistics of him coming up there. It'll be a great hang. There's still actually, I think, 5 days left to get your discount, your Alphavedic $100 off your ticket. We're offering to all supporters of Alphavedic. So if you put in the discount code Alphavedic23 and the checkout of musicandsky.com, you'll get $100 off your ticket. So jump on that. There's still some accommodations left and tasty food there. We got mineral water being piped in from this amazing company out in Central California, but away from all the toxicity. They're in a really remote location, bringing in water. So we're taking it all very seriously in terms of your nourishment at this event, because we preach, we walk what we talk. So looking forward to that. Today, the new golden age and alchemical take on the beautiful element of gold is, quote, physical matter, really a product of atomic elements conjugated into a fixed form and function. On this in-house discussion, we dissect a more plausible alternative to the conventional periodic table of elements, consistent with the predictable patterns revealed through nature's every moment. Quote, when we look at the stars in the firmament, we recognize the same pattern of birth, death, and rebirth cycles that is familiar to us on Earth. That's the great Walter Russell. The element gold has been historically coveted as a medium for wealth, while being esteemed for its medicinal properties and status as a universal standard for good reason. Gold most purely conveys the solar essence and was brought forth in abundance through architecture and art in the first two golden ages for raising effect of both body and spirit of man. Periodicity is the one observable fact undeniable to our senses, and when the transitionary state of the elements is again recognized as the basis for science, humanity will, for once and all time, be free of the superstition of being held captive in a physical matrix. We're going to highlight transitional gold, known as ORM to many of you, as an example of the cycle of creation and how this knowledge can be put to use now. Barre, I love our transitional element gold 0-point liquids. I put them in my lemon water every morning. That might be a fun way to start, or I don't know, take it away.
Sure. Well, this episode, you and I are in the department of wing it. We don't like to prepare because we prefer to be spontaneous, even when we have guests. I just think it works best that way. It serves our temperament best also. And we had this in-house chat, especially free of a guest, because we like to do these every so often so we can talk whatever we want, about whatever we want. And so the other day, Shannon came in with a question from one of our customers about the gold, transitional gold. And I just happen to have one here.
Oh, that's
And
our illumined.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what that is 4 primary herbs. I won't give you the full infomercial, but it's in a shilajit base, which all of our Illumin blends are. But this one's special because it has transitional gold. A lot of people have talked about ormus, orbitally rearranged monatomic elements, or Ethereum gold. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. So back to the story, Shannon posed this question about transitional gold. What is it? One of our customers wanted to know. So I gave Shannon a little tutorial about that. For me, it all began in 1990. There was a soil scientist. His name was David Hudson. He's iconic in the realm of ormus. And because he discovered these elements in the soil that weren't behaving according to the conventional laws of physics. If you put a pile of them together in a concentrated form, they'd float, they'd do all sorts of things, including defying gravity, which we know gravity is another myth, but still would raise the eyebrows of most folks out there that don't understand the nature of our realm. And so being a proponent with his background of the atomic theory of matter, he termed ORM, or orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. I have preferred over the years to call them transitional elements, because if you look at the table of elements, the way they actually exist, not as fixed materialistic elements, but as transitional waveforms, then you realize all elements are traveling through 9 different octaves. And just hang with me, folks, this doesn't have to be complicated. And through those octaves, all of the metallic elements that we think of, including gold, transition into the next element on this spiral. And the periodic table of elements necessarily has to be observed as a spiral going through 9 different stages of development, or octaves. And transitional gold in particular, since it's the apex of, you could call it the emperor, since it's the solar medium of the pinnacle of physical development within the metallic elements, which is why it has such high resonance beneficial properties. It does very special things. And in past golden ages, gold was lavishly adorning architecture, art, and very abundant on the Earth's surface. Now, since gold became coveted as a monetary standard, and also more for its materialistic nature, the lords, will say, of this realm, the hierarchy of intelligence, necessarily had to bring gold into more of out of the view and not in as great abundance because of its powerful resonance. If the heart is not pure, then it can be used against people. And that's, in fact, what it's been used for since it became a monetary coveted substance. And people selfishly have tried to hoard it and then use that to control other people. Now, someday, very soon, hopefully within our lifetimes, the 3rd and final golden age, which is just coming into view right now, is going to once again bring this resonance and greater abundance into the outer world so that it can bless mankind and elevate our consciousness, which is what the frequency of gold is really about. So back to the periodic table of elements. Transitional elements deviate from the false atomic theory of matter in that they recognize that there's, again, no fixed medium in nature, nothing physical at all, and everything is cyclic. Just like we talk about in the recent COVIDius event, when I look under the microscope and the Bigglesons look under their microscopes, we see microbes that are constantly in transition. Now, if the medical profession were to see any one of those transitional forms, they might term it as a fungus or a bacterial rod or any number of other things that I had to learn in medical studies that, again, disavows the fact that things are always in transition and cyclic in nature and go through those cycles in order to produce different functions within our realm, within our bodies, and so forth. So the elements on a periodic table are no different. When they climb through the octaves and go through the final radiation cycle and become what we think of as radioactive, it's simply the elements now widening their dispersing into a less condensed form and then radiating in a way so that it goes back to step one full circle and goes through the octaves again. But those radioactive elements, like all the other elements, serve a particular purpose in the Earth's crust, in our bodies, when we get trace minerals through our diet and so forth. The radioactive elements are supposed to be in a certain place within the crust of the realm so that they break down other elements that then move closer to the surface and make them available for plants to take up and for us to eat and repeat the cycle. So
there I put the you see I put the Russell I put the Russell periodic chart up just for everyone to see, because I think I was looking at it up at my wall here. I have it framed. I look at it every day and I was like, this is a great visualization of what you're talking about.
And what's great is if you understand this chart, you understand your body. If you understand your body, you understand the larger realm and how it works with the constellations above our head and the things that we talk a lot about on our program. And these constellations are the first part of an electrical realm. And those constellations convey resonance. You could call that the conductive part of an electrical system. And then they are modified through the ethers until they hit the ground, which you could consider the south pole of a larger electrical realm or a toroidal field. And then they hit the final part of any electrical system, which is called the capacitors, which receive resonance, receive electricity, store that electricity for our use. Our bodies are micro versions of this entire system. So when you see this spiral here, as far as depicting how the elements go through these octaves, the same thing is happening in our bodies. We have our own etheric medium within our bodies. We have different names for it: the mental plane, the astral plane, the etheric plane, the physical plane. And then there's a conductive system of regulators that goes through the midline, through the equator, which coincides with what some people call the chakras and so forth. So that old saying, as above, so below, know yourself, you'll know the universe, is great. So what we were talking about earlier, as far as that event that's going to blow the doors open off all the conspiracies, not theories, but real conspiracies that have controlled us since JFK's time, we get lost a little bit in the woods, I think, with all those stories, because the real thing that they're trying to conceal from us is exactly what we're talking about. And that is not just the nature of our realm, but we in ourselves are a miniaturized version of the realm. And that if you understand the ability we have, not just within our own universe, which we think of as our biology, but then our place in a larger realm, then these controllers, would-be controllers, would not be able to do what they do. Also, Without these controllers, the essence of gold would never have been hoarded in the first place, because there's no need to hoard it because there's an abundance for everyone. But they understood exactly what we're talking about. They understood if they could harness the resonance, not create just fake money, which is just the crudest part of the scam, but if they could harness this resonance for themselves and gain power from it, and then control us with it, then that was the real thing. So now I think we're talking about Ethereum gold or transitional gold. Those transitional elements we could think of as pre-metallic. When you look at the elements on the periodic table, conventionally, we think of them as metallic substances. And those metallic substances, that's what they appear to through our senses. Those keynotes in between, those split notes, some of them we call isotopes. We have different names for them, but the transitional elements in general are pre-metallic, and you could think of them as ceramic. And in this state, that's why David Hudson, who I actually met up with in 1990 after his discovery of these elements and got a private tutorial on them and was involved with them ever since, those elements in that pre-metallic form have very different attributes, and again, defy the laws of what we think of as conventional physics. Now, in that particular state, when you consume them, they have a special effect on our nervous system. Our nervous system is actually a superconductive system. That means that it is designed to absorb energy, just like any etheric medium is capable of doing directly without digesting food or any such thing. No physical medium is necessary when you understand waveform mechanics, and that all of these things are available just by the very act of our awareness of them without any limitations that would impede our use of them because maybe we aren't aware or actually disbelieve in the way things really work. So these transitional elements, when they're in abundance in our body, they cultivate our nervous system so that it can not only receive information instantly unimpeded, but also allow us to have signals traveling through our nervous system at beyond the speed of light. That's another story what the speed of light actually is. It's not what we're taught in physics. But also there would be no need for an outside energy source, just like an automobile with a superconductive system would not need fossil fuels, excuse me, that's improper also. Our fuels aren't from ground up dinosaurs. And I mean, it's so ludicrous. Every word we say is like just going back into the mythology, right?
Yeah.
So these elements and why we put them in our products, in our 0 point products and some of our lumen products, is because it cultivates our neurology back to that state of superconductivity so it can operate with greater efficiency, get whatever it needs more directly from the atmosphere. And we've talked often about through the science of ionization analysis, which is the way I test soil and bodily fluids when I'm doing medical work, that looks at things electrically rather than chemically. And it also does reveal that we get at least 70% of our nutrition directly from the atmosphere. So we'll leave that. Now, these transitional elements used to be in greater abundance in the soil. And just as our soil is more deplete, at least in our farming soil, of just trace elements, period, these transitional elements that are more delicate because they're those in-between notes, they are even less abundant than they used to be. And so our bodies suffer because of that. So not only do we want to put things, and again, we're using some of our products just as a context for what we're talking about today, not trying to do a commercial here. The products are all in a fulvic base, which gives us pre-digested minerals, because that's very important. But then the transitional elements are additionally added so that we have not only the main keynotes, but also the in-between notes of those transitional elements, so that we can, again, cultivate our nervous system back to a state of superconductivity. And not only would our bodies do much better and be impervious to what we think of as aging and illness, but our consciousness would very quickly start to see this realm for what it is firsthand, because it's right before our eyes all the time, but our eyes, our sight, our senses have been limited, so that we're using a very crude portion of 5 senses rather than the full spectrum of all 12 senses. So how are we doing so far, Mike?
I think it's important it really, the real science here just reaffirms the laws of the realm, that everything's in motion, everything's in transition, everything's vibrating, right? Everything is frequency. And of course, the modern fallacies of materialism and scientism are always pushing that everything is concrete, stable, in place, physical matter. Even though in quantum physics and stuff, they do admit that things are in constant motion and vibration and all that, but at a very crude level compared to what we're talking about. And I think it's important why, and I think we'll touch on this today, one of the 3 aspects of Hermeticism, which is the true science of that's thousands and thousands of years old, is alchemy, besides also, astrology and magic. Those are the 3 elements of Hermeticism, the Trice Great Hermes. So that's what he was named after, those 3 aspects. So it's funny when we mention magic, people go, well, that's insane. But no, that's a very important thing to understand here, is also this concept of magic, or how the ethers work in relation to our consciousness. But the transitional elements are a very modern way, I think, we can sort of see how this all works.
Our good friend Yerasimos asked me one time on an interview, I was on his platform, and he said, I believe it was magic, or maybe it was miracle, but I think magic. He said, so what's magic? And I just said, well, it's science not yet understood. Now, magic is a much maligned word. There are certain religious persuasions that, in my opinion, take the words of scripture and greatly misinterpret them. And if you really understand what they're telling us, it's all about this magical realm, which means that our consciousness, when in a state of awareness, can literally precipitate. That means rather than go through a physical medium in order to get food, money, whatever you think you need on the physical plane, you can literally, with your mind, but not just your mind, your emotions, because if your emotions are in disbelief, then right now this conversation is going to be creating cognitive dissonance, because part of you might be saying, oh, this is interesting, I wonder if it's true, but then your emotions say, no frickin' way. That's cognitive dissonance. So we really have to get our emotions and our mind working together. And of course, in the ascended master realm, they talk about that ascension takes place when we have a unity between heart and mind, not the physical organs themselves, but those 2 planes of existence on the etheric level. And then you understand that precipitation is not only possible, but it's the first thing that you do as your awareness grows. That means you can outpicture something, hold out your hand and have it appear. I got some backstories on that. I'll leave those for later. Also, teletransportation, being able to take what we think of as a material object, could even be our body, and dematerialize right in front of somebody's eyes and then rematerialize in a different location or bilocation, be in different places at the same time. All of these things, and we could go on. Levitation. Levitation is nothing more than being able to harness your focus so that you are now at the equator of the compression radiation cycle of the toroidal field that precipitates matter in the first place. And if you can hold your consciousness right there and not be forward or backwards, now you can literally levitate yourself or things. These are things that martial artists did readily, in years past, and people in the world that still do it now. And so when you understand the laws of physics, how they really are, how it's mistaught in our curriculums, then that belief system, or going into a Shaolin temple for your entire life and debugging yourself, getting rid of all these limiting false belief systems, then you can perform magic. But it's not magic at all. It's our prerogative and our responsibility to manipulate this realm in any way we want. I had a client a while back who was, of a particular, again, religious slant, and was very up in arms about the use of just the term magic because they thought somehow it was satanic or something. But no, that's not it at all. Satanic is just the inversion of exactly what we're talking about, to make us believe that these things are not within our capabilities and also hidden from us so that we can be controlled and these powers can be misused against the population. So that's where we're at now. And our whole mission at Alpha Vedic for many years now, beginning in, well, for myself, it became in athletics, just pushing the envelope. Can I shave 1/10 of a second off my 40 time? Can I, add a few pounds onto a clean and snatch, when I'm Olympic lifting? And what you're doing is constantly expanding the limits. It starts with the physical level. That's why I think athletics is so important, because you're using your consciousness to direct your will force to achieve things that you maybe before thought you couldn't do. For me, that was a segue into medicine. And then medicine became an additional segue into different levels of medicine. It had to incorporate understandings of what we're talking about here today, namely alchemy, which is a true science, which then leads us to the understanding that disease is not a real thing. There's nothing in nature that makes us sick or is designed to work against us in any way. And that, in fact, we are the masters of this universe, or this realm, we'll say. So that's what we're here to learn.
And isn't it interesting in athletics, which, I always, when I think of athletics, I think of the Greeks, I think of classicism and the expression of the apex of human form through sculpture, and of course the Olympics, and then standing on the pedestal as the victor. What do you get? You get a gold medal, right? As the supreme victor, and then it goes to silver, and then to what? Bronze. So that is interesting how there is that sort of the levels, right? Gold being 1, silver 2, and bronze being 3. And I think that's a really powerful connection there with the metallurgy and the human form and the human ability to achieve.
Yeah, and that's the real, there's purpose and an understanding behind everything that we just take for granted. And then, of course, as we were talking about medicine being important to wrap our minds around the next level, because then that frees us from the superstition that our own biology is master over us. I mean, how ridiculous is that? It's such an infantile, ludicrous notion. And we have an entire medical institution that pumps in billions and billions of dollars every day just to foster that mythology. Now, we've also segued here at Alphavedic into farming, because now farming brings you back into contact with these elements firsthand, so that you're not only learning how your own biology is inseparable from the outer realm and nature, but then you can also use your consciousness to work with nature and come into focus the fact that the beings of the elements and the powers of nature are other life forms that are more real than we can imagine. How else would anything else exist? And that you can establish a real network of communication with them, work with them, and then provide for all your needs. And of course, factory farming and all of these things where we just go into supermarkets and drive over pavement to get there and then go back to our little cubicles and turn on the plasma screen. We really need to get reconnected. And that's what our mission statement is about. It's about every community. You maybe don't want to farm or whatnot, but every community, including downtown LA, can have little community gardens. We can have, more communities outlying urban centers and in rural areas where you have a number of small farms. We have some friends that are in the farming business and are doing a lot of good things, but they're also, and this isn't a slam against them or anything, because they're doing great things, but they're still trying to cultivate some pretty massive acreage. And it really necessitates a lot of mechanization and, planting in flat rows and all that kind of thing. And it might be cool because it feeds some people some, better than average food with organic fertilizers and things, but it's still really not the way that nature, that you can work with nature in the most efficient way. So what our prototype here is about is little 5-10 acre parcels where you just plant one little area at a time. You don't just go out with tractors and bulldoze massive areas so you can get rows of corn or broccoli, but you plant little communities, which in permaculture we call guilds. And it's no different than walking in the forest. There's community after community, and there's mycelium on the ground. There's the bugs. There's the trees under the canopies of the trees. You have all sorts of other things. So we duplicate that. We plant one tree, create a canopy, then companion planting. We started just a little bit on our Instagram, one little entry about biogeometry. We use resonance testing with biogeometry and radiesthesia in order to help us find where these plants or trees want to be in the first place, who likes who, and just go beyond basic permaculture even to ask questions firsthand through the science of resonance. And so if every community had a number of these small little farms, maybe one like ourselves, specializing in planting medicinal herbs, others that maybe specialize in a certain kind of food, maybe a few acres somewhere else where somebody has a few cows, and just like we do here, Mike, if you want some raw dairy, you just bring your ball jar down there and fill it up and leave $5, on the clipboard there. And, it's a wonderful way to be. And every place could be like that. We could get rid of the factory farming, all the greenies out there that, like in California, Newsom's trying to get rid of trucks that are diesel so that they're all electrical. And of course, that's going to waste way more energy trying to charge those up in the first place. But what if you didn't even need all of those trucks going long distances, even if they're electric, which is horrible, and even if they're transporting organic food over distances, what if you didn't have to do any of that? Think of all the energy saved, and not an energy saved in the name of the Green New Deal, but energy save so that we start emulating nature. Nature is abundant. There's no shortage or limitation of anything, but not one iota of energy is ever wasted either. It's called, efficient use of energy. And the reason why we want to do that, again, is not because of a belief in lack, but in respect for the beings of elements that and the powers of nature that provide for us and with us. And imagine if you have somebody that you love dearly, they give you a gift. Well, you aren't going to just disrespect it and waste what they give you or mistreat it. No, you're gonna really cherish it and appreciate it. So that's really what it boils down to, is appreciating everything we use. And in that consciousness, we no longer have a need to waste. And in fact, we realize that we get a lot more the less we waste in the first place.
Yeah, I think the key word here is sacred. And I think we got into debt, the debt instruments, when we left the sacred, when we left the natural world, moved into cities, left our smaller communities to do commerce with other communities far away, mainly due to technology to supposedly make our life easier, and then went into fiat and debt instrument systems, which took away the sacred connection between us, the land, people, nature, and that idea of abundance got flipped into scarcity. I always say it wrong, I guess. And we are where we're at today, where we've got gruesome Newsom pushing this green electric agenda, which is a total inversion, because green electric is not green at all. It's dirty. And, the California grid's in a perilous state right now just because of all the stupid Teslas out there. My cousin, actually Blakely's cousin, was visiting and was talking about, because he rides his motorcycle all over the country and sees a lot of the US, and was telling me about all the issues with these charging stations and all these Teslas lined up, and then a heavy weight on the grid in the summer. And this was in Central California, where they had to shut down the grid for a little bit because it was, rolling blackouts to become a thing. And all these Tesla drivers were there, and they couldn't do their supercharge because they were going down the 5 to go from the Bay Area to LA. So now they were stranded in like Modesto or something, because they couldn't get their supercharge in because of the rolling blackouts from the supposed electric revolution that's happening. So what is it? It's a funny meme that I saw yesterday, that I didn't envision the future being where humans are still toiling for minimum wage existence, while the computers and robots are making the art and poetry, i.e. AI. That is the twisted, weird world that we're moving towards, that I personally am opting out of. I know, Barre, you opted out a long time ago. And how do we opt out? By going back into the sacred, by going back to the land, by understanding that nature, the true currency of the world, of the realm, is fully abundant, like a seed that just rejuvenates and creates as much as we want when we have care and tender attention and love put towards it. That's why gold was, historically used, because of that idea of the divine. And we can talk about that, its connection to the sun and divine and to all that. So yeah, it's baffling to me that there's so many freaking libtards still out there buying into the green agenda. Sorry, I had to drop the libtard derogatory comment. I know that people don't like when I talk like that, but sometimes I get pissed off.
There is such thing as being retarded also, and I don't mean with Down syndrome or something. It's consciously choosing to be retarded, and I don't mind calling that out either. So no apology necessary for me. And of course, the electrical revolution with the Green New Deal is all predicated on batteries charged with lithium. Lithium is actually an element in the fourth going to the 5th octave, and the portal into that octave is helium. And when you understand helium, it is not an element as we're taught in conventional chemistry, but it's an Akashic record of all the informational fields that make up that octave and the elements that occupy that octave, which happens to be the carbon octave. And so if you look at each octave as a step up, like a pipe organ, where you're building energy in order to create the keynote that's like straight up perpendicular waveform, and the most stable part of that waveform, you know, before you go into the trough or on your way up to the apex, it starts with you enter through the portal of helium. It picks up the information. So the elements that are entering that portal to go into that octave to become lithium, then they successively go through lithium, barium, beryllium, and then finally to carbon. And then from carbon, you go down the other side, which is nitrogen, oxygen, fluoride or fluorine. And so when you understand that all of these elements are transitioning one into the other, and that in the physical realm as we know it, there's really only one element, and that is carbon. And carbon being in that 4th, 5th octave of 9 different octaves, and then all those different tonal fields within each octave, then carbon is not only the most stable, but it's what everything is striving to become as it, you know, travels up and down these tonal fields within octaves, and then also to finally become carbon again. So now if we look in the old alchemical understanding, carbon is the final level of precipitation. It's actually an energy. It's a state of consciousness, but we think of it as a molecular medium. Okay. So carbon is really the south pole of our realm, where the etheric whole mechanism finally precipitates into what we think of as matter and what we register with our senses as being matter. But if you see the whole thing for what it is and understand all the octaves, now getting back to our story, where with that intellectual understanding, and then also getting rid of all false belief systems that affect that cognitive dissonance through our emotions, then we can, just like operating any kind of machinery or knowing how to operate our computers here, we can then manipulate that realm with our consciousness and realize it's not only our prerogative, but our responsibility. But back to lithium, the first element, you know, that takes us through the 4th, 5th octave. Okay, that's going to fuel all these batteries, which is predicated on tens of thousands, who knows how many African slaves working these horrible, toxic pits within the continent of Africa, which is also setting us up for the next world war, as the globalists are fighting against the Chinese in order to, get control of these fields and these massive populations of slaves to do this horrible work, child labor, and so forth. And of course, these are the same ones that are race baiting the rest of us and, calling us racist. Meanwhile, they're behind all that kind of business. So lithium, when it's mined in that entropic kind of mindset, it's going to use up these elements that are in a certain part of the earth at the expense of just letting the whole cycle repeat itself over and over again. So these elements can be used the way nature intends them. And then we run out of them, fight over them, create wars over them, kill people, enslave people, and so forth. And then you got the virtue signaling libtard that drives up in a Tesla and thinks that they're all full of themselves because they're doing a good
sitting
thing
on an array of those batteries, which are just,
oh man,
EMFs and everything. But Barre, I am tripping out on lithium right now. Not actually, literally, but so lithium there, I'm looking at the charts right at the helium portal. And isn't it interesting that it's used to treat bipolar syndrome for the manic side? And that is on the bipolar. the polarity,
Yeah.
the bipolar on each side, right? And so in everybody's carrying, I'm guilty right now. I'm still in the Mac cult just for the time being. I'm trying to get off it, guys. It's like my last step towards sovereignty or digital sovereignty. I'm waiting for the Cordal phone to come out. But basically, we're all carrying this lithium battery around with us too. That stripped identity, that stripped piece of the planet, which has a specific reason why it's in the ground, right? With its function. Now it's been disseminated across all of humanity in this technology that's entrapping and snaring us. What is the ramification of that? What can we get a little bit more into this? Because I'm really tripping on this right now.
Well, another little element of lithium, of course, is Governor Gruesome here, who is wanting us to transform our truck fleets. One thing that's going to happen, and they know it, this is actually part of the agenda, is it's going to cause every UPS and FedEx truck and all the trucking industry combined to have to remodify, which is going to cost, well over $100,000 per truck or transportation vehicle. And that's going to really cripple the whole supply chain. Trucking companies are going to slow down greatly. And that's what it's purposely doing. It's creating scarcity. So, of course, these politicians are used by the globalists to bring us to our knees, but then they go along with it because the globalists appeal to politicians through their avarice, and people like Gruesome and Aunt Nancy, of course, all have the stocks for the lithium industry and are making bank in the meantime and making hundreds of millions of dollars. So these are just low-level orcs that are useful idiot tools, for the globalist. But meanwhile, they're all full of themselves too. But yeah, interesting point you bring up as far as lithium for treating bipolar. But quick segue on that just came to my mind. Now we're in the pharmaceutical industry. We're also using these elements exclusively in a synthetic form in order to override our chemistry, which has also the double twofer, we'll say, that the two globals use, which they can make bank, billions of dollars per second on the pharmaceutical industry. And then at the same time, foul up our chemistry and therefore impede our consciousness from entering higher realms in the first place. Now, if somebody's bipolar, well, the first thing I would do, and that's what I've done many, many times with those kinds of clients that come in, is I'm going to go in, I'm going to treat the brain. And the brain, for instance, if you know some little ear points, like one right here on the tragus of the ear, and the hypothalamus and thalamus points down here. This one here we call point 0 because it's it actually affects the laterality of the brain and the corpus callosum that transfers information between the hemispheres. You can treat those points directly. You can link them up with emotional content from the limbic system, also through the switchboard here. And with different frequencies, not only test, but manipulate those. And several visits, along with some other therapies that we use as far as manual therapies to manipulate osteopathically, to create a cohesion through the meridian system so it's conducive with the outer ecology, and all these things combined, which is real combined medicine, and maybe even using other means to go into subplanes that affect people's emotions and things. But if you know all those tools, how to put them together, guess what? You don't need lithium, and you're no longer bipolar, and you realize, well, there's nothing such thing as a malady called bipolar in the first place, just like there's no such thing as some little invisible microbe that makes you sick. So back to lithium, yeah, it's just a misuse of the natural elements and distorting those elements to create a reverse symptom that will seem less noxious than the symptom that the people are prescribed that remedy or that pharmaceutical in the first place. So in order,
lithium,
rather than curing, you have a symptom you don't want, so you try to synthetically create an opposite symptom that you think, well, I can live with this better, but in fact, it actually is going to kill you in the long run.
Yeah, it's the typical allopathic modality of stunting a symptom, they're focused on the after effects, not the cause. And we've hit that nail on the head a million times in Alphacast. Those listening get that. But the lithium, so the idea here is that the lithium being sort of vibrating at a higher state than the carbon. It's because it's on the waveform here. I'm looking at the chart. It's before carbon. It's right at the helium sort of portal. So the functionality of that element is what again? And why would it have that effect on the human physiology? And then it also just allows for what amazing charging capacity for batteries. It's a fascinating element.
It is. And it's the very first element that enters the pure carbon cycle octave in order to build up the final momentum to reach that 90% or that 90-degree perpendicular from the equator, which is the most stable structure, and why everything in the physical realm is carbon-based. Our bodies are carbon-based, so forth. So as far as why lithium works that way, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I have all the answers to that one, but somebody in our chat just mentioned that lithium in low dose can really help kids with autism. Oh, yeah. There's some truth to that. I don't know what that individual, maybe they can answer back in the chat here, what form of lithium they're talking about. But I actually use lithium as an oligotherapy. Now, this is naturally occurring trace ilium we use in little vials that sometimes were very useful to achieve effects that this individual is talking about here, like with autism and things. So it does have that use. Now, when you concentrate it and then change the structure of it in a way so that you get a patented drug out of it, that's another whole different element. So I would, just respond to this individual that, lithium, just like fluoride, can be helpful too as a trace element, and you need it, but not to be confused with fluoride that we get in the water, which is a industrial waste product and highly toxic, and not anything that we get, in our foods through natural soil. So lithium, as far as why it does that, I'm thinking about, well, number one, I know neurologically what causes something like bipolar or even autism. It's a laterality issue. In other words, an imbalance. And there's ways, if you understand how to manipulate the brain centers with the right frequencies, you can go in and create a balance in that laterality and get rid of the symptoms. So now looking at lithium, and I'm just kind of guessing off the top of my head here, and the octave that it's going into, and then into that most stable fifth octave, which is our playground, the carbon cycle. I could see where that could maybe have those sorts of effects neurologically as well. And maybe in order to prime that whole carbon cycle for greater stability, both structurally as well as mentally and emotionally, that is primed by the element before it becoming lithium through the helium portal and going into that octave in the first place. So don't know, I guess, is my good answer.
Yeah, someone in the chat here said they have solarized lepidolite. I think I said that right, which is a source of lithium for ups and downs that helped a lot. Got it from an old mine south of Taos, New Mexico. That's interesting too, touching on crystals and the actual core, rocks and stuff where elements come from, and engaging in those in ways that isn't like ingesting or something. It's just like holding it. And yeah, really interesting, guys. Fascinating. The mineral kingdom is just blows my mind every time we go deep diving into this stuff, Barre.
Well, the mineral kingdom, like all the four kingdoms of nature, is a composite of 7 in resonant fields. Now, some people like to call them the 7 rays. when you get into the seven rays, people go goofy. They say, okay, that's Lucifer and the bad guys again. And they talk to about Alice Bailey in the United Nations. And, again, all knowledge has been usurped, inverted, and the truth has been used against us, but it was still truth originally. So these seven resonant fields in different combinations are responsible for traveling through the 12 constellations above us to create the resonance, to create the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal, and finally the human kingdom. And we're a composite of all the prior three. Now, the mineral kingdom is an interesting one because it's made out of the first ray, which is that, what we would consider the Godhead, and then also the third ray of active intelligence. And those two rays combined are going to create a very finite sense of order, and, that allows the mineral kingdom to crystallize in very specific processes and things. And then that becomes, in turn, the backbone for the plant kingdom that uses different rays that, get more into what we would consider what creates the emotional components and other aspects of the human, and then the animal, composite of the first two, and then human. We're the totality of all the seven rays, which is means that we are in turn lords of the seven rays on this realm, just like there are hierarchies of intelligence, seven levels of consciousness or beings, however you want to think of them, in the first place, that gave birth to this realm in the first place. And of course, that could also bring us into what's the nature of this realm. Are we a spinning ball, or are we a toroidal field? Is it a simulation? But then when you understand it from waveform mechanics, you realize that, well, it's very malleable. It's something that we can create or co-create with our own consciousness, as long as we play on the overall canvas that those hierarchies created for us. And then things go pretty smoothly if we use our creative abilities to go contrary, like the globalists and folks are doing now. Then not only is that going to create chaos, but it's also going to come back and bite your own ass and take you out eventually. That's why we really don't have to fight with anybody. Other than just don't comply, don't consent. You don't want to go along with it and just passively say, oh, they're destroying themselves. It's like, no, just don't put up with it. And then you'll see them go down in flames even sooner. But the point is, yeah, this is a very plastic realm, and we have a lot to say about it. And then there have been, just like archaics, our friend Jason had kind of hedges in on some levels of, information that I think have some kernels of truth in them, and that some levels of consciousness have made it their business in order to create mental overlays, in order to be maybe simulation control grids that impede us in different ways, just like the jab and all the cell towers and everything that we talk about, now have to filter through a different prism. And then if you're weak of mind and ill and or just young at the soul level, then you may succumb to what they're trying to do. In the meantime, we all have the ability to overcome those obstacles and use them, just like an athlete going down to the track and running 440 repeats. You can use them to get stronger and be so formidable that you'll just laugh in their face. So that's the point where we're at historically right now. Some people are choosing to go for it, and other folks are still living in fear. And that's not, a criticism. It's just we're all in different places, and it's a matter of timing. Is it our time or not? But this realm is a simulation. I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah, I mean, touching on Walter Russell, he's a great character from the 20th century, who, for me, has taken the science and the spirituality together to illustrate how the simulation of thought works. It's the mind of God. And you did say something that a word that's really important, soul, right? And of course, soul has been stripped out of science in the 19th century, or really 18th century, with the Royal Society and the whole creation through Darwin and material. You could go even back farther, where it was disjointed with Descartes, but there was still a recognition of soul. But obviously, the great experiment of the Republic was based around the concept and the knowledge of knowing that we all have a soul, right? Of course, the founding fathers of this republic, they put it right in the documents, and the powers that shouldn't be have done everything that they can through scientism to fool humanity into forgetting this very important aspect of soul. And I bring up soul because the other, of course, in Spanish or Latin root, soul being the sun, connects directly to all the rays, right? The sun emits all the rays, which is from God, which is directly related to gold. So tying it all the way back to gold, and why gold has been historically used as the divine element of value, because it is the direct divine connection to the sun, to all the rays, and to our divine connection to God.
And there is a transmitting utility, which is an actual being whose job in this realm is to precipitate those solar rays into the very structure of our earth. And if gold was not in the earth's crust in that form, life on the surface would not be possible. So it's literally the informational fields that give all of life on the surface of our realm the possibility of having an experience in the first place.
So you hear a lot of like modern monetary folks saying gold has no intrinsic value, that we've given it value based on, its rarity, its malleability, its, the fact that it doesn't break down or deteriorate, which is interesting. It doesn't corrode, just like the soul, right? It's non-corrosive. But what you're saying is, when we really understand the divine nature of it and how the true physics works, it has a lot of inherent value.
Yeah, and let's just go into what is soul. Well, soul is an acorn. An acorn is the electrical recording, the Akashic record of an oak tree. Now, of course, our brilliant scientists are trying to figure out how you water an acorn and it turns into a mighty oak. Well, it's not from the chemical elements within a tiny acorn. It's because it's literally an etheric record of all the patterns that, when activated in the south pole of the Earth's surface and activated by water, which is the transmuting utility of all informational fields within this realm, then that activates it and allows it to grow and ground into a tree. On the human level, a soul is an electrical recording. It's an electrical recording of all of the experiences that we've ever had in any embodiment, hundreds or thousands of them. And that seed comes into us to initiate the embryological unfolding at the moment of conception as a seed atom, we call it. We even had ways of acknowledging this in medicine and accessing it. And that seed atom is, again, what was the beginning of another human embodiment when we cycle through the different cycles, just like the microbes, just like the elements that we're talking about, and then re-embody. So those folks that say, well, when does life begin? And, is abortion a good idea? What's the big deal? Well, it just so happens that if you understand the cycle of reincarnation, and that you have a long history of a soul embodying in order to expand consciousness at the pinnacle of life within this realm, which is humanity, then that wealth of experience on both sides, however you judge it, and affords us the next opportunity to attain the ascension, just as the Christ was trying to tell us is what we're all here to do. Okay, so we abort a baby, and well, it's not a life form yet. Well, what happened? And all of that etheric level, all of that experience through all those embodiments. And in order to coalesce another biological unit, which is a very complex technology, to afford another experience that is not only going to allow personal attainment, but also to act as a conduit within this plane to bring in the energy of the creator in order to raise elevate the essence of the entire realm, because our realm is also a living being, which is also in a state of ascension. So, there's a lot at stake. And the fact that we have abortion clinics and things, this is not a political thing. It's not a religious thing. It's just a real gross ignorance where we think that it's no big thing because we don't recognize it as a human form yet or something. There's a heavy, heavy, heavy price to pay for those practices.
Imagine being an abortion doctor, the karmic repercussions.
Yeah, gnarly. So let's look at it alchemically. What's a soul? So if you look at the etheric realm, you start with, and we've talked about this often, in the old alchemical jargon, we call it the fire element, which is that first spark of light that is created by consciousness, pure consciousness, having an idea. That then becomes the fire element. And in our chemical understanding, that would be considered hydrogen. That is what we call a volatile element because it's a gaseous form. It's not physical as we think of it. The next one down is nitrogen, which has a great ability to coagulate. So working in unison with helium, we have the first fermentation kind of process within the atmosphere where those volatile elements are starting to think about taking form. Then in combination, they create the next element down, water, which can be related to oxygen. And then that water is the first fixed element. Now, if you take the last volatile element, which is nitrogen, combine it with the water element, the first fixed element, that's the soul. And that's what the alchemists called sulfur. Now, the mercury, which is anonymous intelligence, not in a confined or not confined, but in a particular form, that or also called prana, chi, and so forth. That's the first two volatile elements. That's your helium. I'm sorry, your hydrogen and your nitrogen.
So you
and
could call
now
Mercury almost spirit. That's the spirit,
yeah.
and then the other is the soul. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So now we're understanding precipitation a little bit. And that's why, I can go into my little lab and do old world alchemy and start to isolate the volatile elements, create fixed elements and so forth, and create attributes at will, as long as I mimic exactly the way nature does and actually speed up the process. So maybe do things in a matter of months that would take nature, tens of thousands of years. If you're waiting for a carbon to, go all the way full circle through the 9 octaves and become carbon again, we can speed all that up. And that's why the old tales of metallurgy and so forth, there's actually truth. They were actually creating gold and other more precious metals, more elevated metals out of base metals. And in fact, that's why Rome really wanted to conquer Egypt, because they had a very high degree of advancement in metallurgy. And the Romans were very much afraid that the Egyptians could then use that understanding in order to create weaponry, armies, and so forth, or just monetary value that would allow them to conquer the Romans. So, and then of course, that's where they went in and burnt down the Library of Alexandria to get rid of all that stuff and, burn people and so forth. So, these are some just kind of fun historical facts that help us understand. And then the final thing, Mike, sorry, is the salt or the body, the actual form that we think is our body or plants or things we see in the four kingdoms of nature. That is the final conjugation of the soul and the Mercury working in order to manifest form that becomes fully fixated. And at that point, it's the constellation resonance beginning, as it filters through the 7 rays, going through that whole etheric ladder and then becoming crystallized in the form. And if we understand our process or our place in that process, then our consciousness is not going to be hypnotized exclusively on the compression cycle of the toroidal field, which keeps us held captive in the matrix. But we are then going to instead be in that moment beyond time at the equator of the 2 creative cycles, not be held captive here, but also be actively creative and then be able to manipulate all these forces and achieve those things that the ascended masters say it's our responsibility here to learn how to do in the first place.
There's so much there. Alchemy is just mind-blowing, how it brings it all together. It's the esoteric chemistry not esoteric, excuse me, the divine chemistry. And it seems esoteric because of the framework of our reality. We just don't live in a world like they did back then when alchemy was very, mainstream. They had a totally different conception of the world through symbols, right? And the way language worked and the way they just interacted with nature, understanding that that things would transmute and they could manipulate nature in ways that we've lost. But that is fascinating when I'm thinking of how you do your spagyrics and how you're literally taking that, you're distilling the soul of the plant and then bringing the spirit of the entire plant kingdom and then embodying that in a salt for us to take into our body. It's really brilliant science. And it also, what I love about it is that it takes into fact the consciousness of the person doing it, where mainstream chemistry doesn't factor any of that in, even though now mainstream physics is having to admit that the observer plays a massive role. It's just mind-blowing.
Exactly. And then, of course, in conventional science, we have the atomic theory of matter going back to the table of elements. And what is every atom? We have to get back into the spinning ball theories.
Yep.
Electrons circulating, protons. So then they say, okay, if you change the number of electrons in a particular atom or protons, and then it's going to become the next element or a different element. Well, if you were to take any one of those so-called, according to theory, circulating elements of an atom, it would literally distort the whole waveform in a way, if you understand it from that perspective, that would annihilate what you think that substance would become if you just alter the number of electrons, protons, and so forth. So it's kind of a ridiculous notion. And of course, it's been debunked, many times by a lot of folks.
It denies the whole fractality of the reality we're in. It tries to put it in computation, mathematician nonsense, right? Where it's just very reductionist and it's crude. It's pathetic. I think that's why I hated chemistry in high school. I had to actually get a tutor because it just didn't make any sense to me. I was like, I just did not vibe with it at all. And so going back to alchemy and gold is an interesting. I mean, everybody knows this, right? Well, alchemy is all about changing lead to gold. But I think there's a fascinating story around all that, right? What is lead, right? Lead is essentially like the death element. It blocks it blocks the waveforms. It's directly connected to Saturn. And then you have gold, which we've already touched on, being the soul, being non-corrosive, direct connection to the sun and to God. So there is I think, a higher degree, and yes, physically that was being done, but also I think there's a grand sort of metaphysical importance to that. Yeah.
And doesn't it make sense that when you understand these octaves and the roles that each of these constellations and so-called planets and things, their function within our realm, doesn't it kind of make more sense that they're circulating within the realm rather than us circulating around them?
Yeah, I mean, that is what astrology was supposed to be about. The science of astrology is about that exactly, that it's within the realm and how it's directly connecting to us, right? And then, of course, you have magic, which is connected directly to the moon, and then you have alchemy directly connected to the sun. It makes so much more sense. Yeah, everything's just an expanding, infinite, random chaos. All coming from one big bang that just came out of nowhere.
Also, it lends a lot of more interesting discussion around the debate on what shape the Earth is. I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a glober either. In fact, I just am more interested in Jaron's last event. In fact, he's going to be on our on an upcoming episode. Yeah.
Yeah, we have Jaron from Jaronism, that awesome channel, and he does the True Earth Summit. He'll be on Alphacast in a few weeks, I think next month sometime.
That's going to be fun. I'd like to talk to him more about just the functional aspects. Of course, he has to deal with, all the folks that are just arguing at a more rudimentary level as far as what shape the Earth is. But now flat earthers would crucify me for this because I would say, who cares? But I do care as far as how the realm works, because when you understand how the realm works and everything we've been talking about as far as the mechanics of the etheric medium and how that channels down into our biology, how we can conduct our affairs here on the ground, then, of course, that is what is deliberately occulted, because that would bring us out of any of the control mechanisms. So when we understand how things work, now we have solutions. And I think it's really a distraction about just arguing about what shape it's in.
Well,
I don't care.
It's interesting. Jaron recently had a past guest we had on talking about Antarctica and globe versus flat debate, and it's kind of funny to go watch it. But you said something earlier in this chat about the South Pole being sort of a generation point of, I almost think of it like the South and North Pole being an anode cathode, or, part of the great toroidal battery. So isn't it interesting that there's all sorts of hijinks going on down there in Antarctica around the South Pole? It seems like they probably really know what's going on with the functionality, and they're trying to hack things and do all sorts of weird stuff down there to mess with the unfolding, how we unfold into the realm, if you will.
Well, I think the issue is understanding that just because we call it the South Pole doesn't mean it's the South Pole.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a toroidal field, which I can't understand how it could be anything but that, because, it's just proven out in so many levels that we are living electrical toroids, and the electrical field has a north and south pole. Now, a north and south pole can create many things of all different kinds of shape. But just because we've designated Antarctica as the bottom of a pole, well, I think when we say that, we're just falling into the globe mechanism. Now, one thing I'm not convinced about at all is that we're a spinning ball. It just there's too many things to refute that. So I want to go short of just arguing about shape again, because I don't think that's the argument or the discussion we should be having. So maybe let's just call it Antarctica and not call it the South Pole in the first place. But either way, whatever your belief system is, there's a South Pole as far as the electrical toroid.
Yeah, that makes
And
total
there's
sense.
a North Pole, which is exactly what you said, being the anode and the cathode.
Yeah. Yeah, and have you seen the theory? I just saw this on Instagram that the moon is an overlay map of the realm. And
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
yeah, and there's the Crater Earth guy who's Google, what's his name? He's got a funny name on YouTube. I'd love to get that guy on Alphacast, but he kind of goes deep into all this. But yeah, I mean, that actually makes a lot of sense that it's a reflective map for us. And that's why magic works with that. I mean, Islam really understood that as like a moon, it came out of the moon cult. And there's a lot of great traditions that are lunar. So yeah, it's just more as above, so below cool stuff. And the fractality of this realm that we're in is so much more magnificent than the base materialism that science is currently portraying. I feel bad for people that just won't open their minds to this kind of stuff, that either way do get trapped on just the shape stuff and can't open their mind at actually we're talking about a fractal simulated reality where consciousness is the main driver. And when we get stuck in the shape debate, we are just getting back into the materialism box. So that's why I appreciate Jason Brashears. I appreciate people that will dive deeper into how the realm is, formulated around consciousness.
And when the body, I became a doctor. I thought I was going to be a sports medicine guy, just do that. But it led me into different things I never expected. But in hindsight, I realized why I did that all these years. And it's because it really allowed me to have a little universe to play with, with all the thousands of bodies and see how things work. And when you use different resonance created by light, sound, herbology, homeopathy, working with the mechanics with your own hands, then things change. And the most important organ that we don't think of often is our skin. Our skin is the most sensitive. If you think about it, it's a boundary that we create, which is our own little universe and everything outside of ourselves. So when I go on the surface of the skin and can do very precise testing to find out where certain spots are on the skin that are going to affect remote areas internally into the body, and then also test those spots, and some spots that go directly into the brain, mainly through the ear, and affect them with different frequencies that can be delivered by electricity, laser, color, all the different instruments I use, or even biogeometry, where you're working on a more finer resonant level. And you see that that's really the way things work. It's really about capacitors receiving resonance. And then if you know enough about that whole medium, then you can manipulate that toroidal field to come into a state of balance. Now, if we just go outside at night and, we're blessed here because there's no streetlights or anything, and you just look at this nighttime sky, you realize that there's a real palpable resonance happening. It's what the old alchemists talked about. It's why we plant with the stars, harvest with the stars, and look at those things very seriously so that we can more efficiently harness the compatible resonance with whatever medicine we're trying to make, with whatever plant we're trying to grow, or certain things that we do in just our life experiences. There's just, depending who we are and our particular idiosyncrasies, there's things that are going to work better at certain times than other times.
You want
And
to
if I
hear a
look at,
cool resonance story? So
oh,
I
cool.
recently was inspired by your 10 million view electroculture video on Instagram. So I started
That's
doing it
freaking scary. 10 million views.
I started doing it myself. I mean, I've been planning to. I've just been really busy with the end of COVID. So I had like 5 Christmas trees out of my land over the last years. I just have been keeping them, which turn into great electroculture poles. So I stripped them down to a perfect pole, and they've been on the land forever, so they know my land really well. By the way, we don't buy Christmas trees. We cut them down in the forest up here. Yes, we get our license to do it from the Forest Service. But that being said, I started wrapping my my copper and getting them in the food forest, and did a couple little Instagrams on that. Or actually, I haven't even posted those yet. But anyway, so I've got those resonating now in the food forest. And Miles comes up to me and is like, "Dad, guess what? Did you know we have bees?" I was like, "What do you mean we have bees?" Because we have hives on our land, and we unfortunately lost the colonies last winter due to heavy rains. I need to get a cover on the hives, so they got flooded out. I was really bummed, but we just left the hives there, everything in there, the honey and everything. I just didn't even want to touch it. So we have 3 hives just sitting there, and I went and checked the hives, and 2 of them have whole new colonies in them that swarmed in and found them recently.
Oh yeah, that happens.
So interestingly enough, it kind of happened right after the electroculture rods went up. So my land is vibrating at a resonance and frequency where it's inviting nature in, and also all the fruit trees I've planted and just everything, trying to plant as much awesome stuff in our lawn. I mean, we replaced lawn with like food forest and stuff. So isn't that cool? I've got wild bees, or maybe they are, a colony that, left us when they took off with the original queen. And this is maybe 3rd generation queen from years ago, that the drones, what the role of the drones, many people in traditional science, they just believe the drones are just there to, procreate with the queen, and they're worthless because they're the male bees that don't do anything. According to this book I've read from a psychic beekeeper, is that the drones are actually they're sort of like the messengers, they go between they're the only ones that are allowed to go into other hives and be sort of the representative. What do you call it? When you're representative of your country in other countries, what's that word?
Ambassador.
They're the ambassadors for the queen. So they go out and they go to other hives, and they actually are able to emit a sort of fractal vision of what their hive's doing and where they're at and where they're going and their whole plan. And also they keep the family line of the queens going. So they actually have a memory from all the past lines of previous colonies or previous queens. And then so they have a memory. And then I think maybe those drones came back knowing these hives were here and were like, oh, they're empty. So the swarm came in, and I didn't see it happen, but they're chock full and healthy. So we're stoked. And we have bees now, and they're all over our property pollinating. And what's great is we'll have some liquid gold this fall.
Yeah.
So
and also speaking of liquid gold, honey is the highest medium in order to create spagyric remedies.
Mm-hmm.
So as you know, I'm fired up in the lab right now, and we're going to have a whole line of spagyric remedies, but they're all going to be honey based because it's the highest level of essence that you can use. They aren't going to be alcohol based and so forth. So anyway, different story. What I do with my hives, I started with Langford, panels. Yeah. And then they're labor intensive. You go in, and if the bees are trying to create another knob that you see, for a new queen, you destroy it so they won't, leave you hive. Yeah. But I just I just have a top bar. They do their own thing. I let them get new queens. And then when a queen is nurtured, a new one, then it flies off, takes some bees with it. Now you got more bees in the habitat. And then you have the original, hive very often that stays with you. So I think it's a much more natural way to go. Of course, it's not conducive to factory honey gathering because you want to just have the panels get as much honey as you want. But I'm really kind of fine just with getting a certain amount of honey just for my family's use. And then also I kind of poach a little pollen on their way in. I have little pollen traps. So it takes about a third of the pollen falls into a little drawer. So that's another great thing nutritionally to have as well. But
yeah, if you can get the pollen without
amazing,
damaging the bees, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So so
can I
we've got
just
some
mention
gold on the bees? Go ahead.
one thing on the bees? So I've mentioned this book in the past, and Yannick, shout out to one of our Telegram admins, actually sent me this book. And Bear, I told you about it, and you should definitely read it. It's by Jacqueline Freeman. She's a psychic, holistic honey beekeeper up in the Pacific Northwest here. It's called The Song of Increase. I've read this book twice now. Blakely's read it. She's kind of the beekeeper, my wife in the family here. And this is a great book. And she actually speaks with the bees, and the Song of Increase is how they buzz in the spring when everything's in full bloom. And you can actually go and listen in the hive, and you can hear basically how their humming is different during a different part of the season, from spring, summer, fall. They have a different hum, and there's physiological reasons to that. They're typically in the tone of C, which is interesting. There's a lot of healing around that. Go hug a hive. And it's a really fascinating. Bees to me are the greatest personification of gold and the ethers. They levitate, they don't fly. They're like truly divine little beings. And they're here specifically to help us. They're, phenomenal. And if we ever lose the bees, then we will lose our connection, and we will all die. So yeah, very important little creatures. I highly recommend this book. And also, speaking to your, using the bear hives, I do want to upgrade to those. We do have the more traditional ones. However, we've taken a more off. We don't go into them much ever again anymore. We don't pull out the honey. We leave the honey for them for the winter, and we just maybe will take one out. But yeah, even then we're very worried we're gonna kill a queen or something. They're not the best design. They're designed for commercial honey harvesting. So I do down the line want to upgrade more, or do the Anastasia model where you like use a log or something.
Yeah. Well, the Barre hives mimic a tree trunk, the way they work.
Yeah.
So, bees are special creatures, and there's a lot of different kinds of pollinating bees out there, not just honeybees. And, when you come out here in the farm, like a lot of, when I'm changing irrigation lines and so forth, I have to put my head right in bushes, and it's just like, it's alive with all the buzzing. It's like ridiculous how much sound it is. But it's to me, we have such a friendly relationship with them. We'll have folks that'll come there they're kind of a little standoffish because there's so many of these things flying around. But, I just put my head in there, and they're like petting a dog or something. And they really know you, and they pick up with exactly where you're at, and you'll never get stung in a million years. Unless you could use some bee venom for physical malady, which can be very beneficial. In my practice, I use bee malady as an old anthroposophical remedy, and Apis mellifica in a homeopathic form. So good stuff. So anyway, off-grid elegance, maybe we can wrap up this way. It's Alpha Vedic. We're not deviating from anything, but it's going to be more of on the farm, looking over our shoulders on a daily basis. What's it really like? We're not just off grid. We're out in the boonies. We're truly off grid. There's a lot of folks talking off grid, but you can see their neighbors, and, they're maybe in a rural neighborhood, but we're really out here surrounded, by wilderness in the Six Rivers Wilderness area here. I'm looking at a little mountain range out my window. I know you're right over the hill there. So it's a very special place. And so we just want to give people a peek into our lives. And also, understand that it doesn't have to be um, rugged. Now it's labor intensive and it's a different lifestyle. You can't get around that. But as we say, it's not out slopping the pigs in the snow in the morning. And you can do that. You can have that kind of farm. Uh, that's just not our choice. And we live very elegantly here. We have all the amenities. We have our own power grid. We have pure water. Um, we work long hours, but there's a certain level of aesthetic that when we go into any kind of town or city, we just miss that aesthetic immediately. So it's really a level of elegance that is provided by nature. And if you know how to set yourself up within that realm and live off grid, then it's much more refined than anything you could possibly experience in the city or even in the suburbs. So off-grid elegance is to get that point home and also help us all get to a place where not just everybody's trying to escape the cities, but to just start duplicating these processes wherever you live. And the other thing, it's going to be a lot of how-tos, whether you have a backyard or just a deck with a couple closed container plantings. You can do quite a bit with whatever circumstances you have. And also rebuild our communities. We're always talking about decentralization. Well, it starts with every single person.
And also for health and wellness, not only going into like the ideas of the physic garden and really what physicians should have, and physic garden, right? It's all connected there, but also being in a more asymptomatic or sympathetic sort of neurological way of life, because working long hours, but you're surrounded by the natural design of Mother Nature, and you are in a sort of flow of getting up when the sun comes up, going to bed when the sun goes down, getting all the primary information fields from the sun at the right time and from the pure water. So you're not stressed out like somebody who might be working almost half the time in the city, but is being bombarded by all of the synthetic waveforms and informational fields, and not to mention being on their phone all the time in front of screens and rushing and doing all that. There's a specific healthy resonance to this sort of lifestyle that is very elegant as well. And behind me there is a picture of Anastasia, and I think she's a great embodiment of that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to rough it. I guess that's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
The other thing we're going to have on off-grid elegance is all this, again, will be posted on both of our stations, our original Alpha Vedic, when we're back up and running, as well as this new channel. We're going to have porch talks. So one of our buildings, we have an old-fashioned country porch there. A couple weeks ago, Josh Biggelson of the Biggelson Academy was up. So we had our first little interview, just all sitting out on the porch, real relaxed, and had a great talk. So we'll be airing that next week. We have a lot of special people that visit the farm here. When you come over, Mike, we'll do some special things about that and film them with some of our guests. After Music and Sky, some people will be coming from faraway places to visit the farm, so we can have just little sit around chats. We'll film those. No, that'll all become part of our playlist, which we call Porch Talks. So it's I like that too, because we can deviate a little bit just from our podcast, which the podcasts are great, I think. But then if you can just see us sitting around, like at Music and Sky, they have the fireside chats and things. So it'll be kind of a version of that. So anyway, folks, we appreciate your support and really help us launch this new channel. And we have a lot of special things going on here at the farm. The new membership website that we've been promising for a long time is actually done. Thanks to Mike and Jacob, supporting Mike with that. And that's going to give us a high degree of interactivity, a lot of perks that will come with membership, and also just help our whole humanitarian part of our Alphavedic co-op, which is to support a new way of living within this realm.
Yeah, I can't wait. Shout out to Grant too, that helped on the website. It's been a massive team effort, a lot of customization, and also, not to mention Barre will also have the whole like co-op development going on more with workshops on the land as well, like the I Am the Living Law one we did last year. That was a huge hit. And as we build this out, we'll have more time and more people helping to do more of those, which I'm really excited about, because coming together in person, yeah, like you said, doing these like virtual chats and stuff, like the end of COVID and stuff, it's cool because it gets information out, but there's nothing like coming together in person. So yeah, great chat, man. I love when we do these. I learned a lot today. I feel enriched and fed and ready to get outside. So remember, guys, do that yourself. Get your feet out in the dirt, go ground, go for a hike, go plant something, get that garden going. It's never too late. And inspire your neighbors with your garden, and they might do it as well, right? Be an example. Love you guys, and we'll see you next week. I believe it's the same bat time. We got like Tom Barnett coming up. I don't know if that's next week. We might have a different time again. So just, yeah, we do have Tom Barnett. So it's actually gonna be a little later on Thursday at 3 p.m.
So are we
Pacific.
still censored next week, probably?
Yeah, so we'll be back on this channel next week. We've got, because we're on 2 strikes right now on the other channel, so it'll be 3 p.m. Pacific time with the great Tom Barnett. Always wonderful having him on. Get caught up with all the stuff he's doing. He's been doing a lot with his own stuff around law and equity and health and wellness. The dude's just so great to talk to. Living embodiment.
He's been a good friend to Alphavedic for a long time now.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thanks so much. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next week. Thanks.